One thing that many people battle with when playing D&D or other TTRPGs is trying to maintain the perfect line between too easy and too hard. Some people try to employ a mix of difficulties, while others are more concerned with everything always being balanced. And one thing that massively impacts your ability to control how difficult a combat encounter is, it's not broken spells or action economy, it's resting? Yes, who would have known that resting would be the bane of tension and stakes? Except anyone that knows about story flow, of course. Well, today we're going to talk about resting in D&D and how we can try and work with it, or introduce new rules to try and bring a new feel to the game. So, the problem, and when I say problem, I mean something that can happen rather than an objective issue about the entirety of the game. Rests, whether you're taking a nap, a full sleep, just sitting down to patch your wounds, or whatever it is, they come in two forms. Short rests and long rests. Short rests, of course, are a time for you to spend some hit dice, get some HP back, and of course, get some charges back on abilities that use a short rest in order to recharge. And the blessed long rest gives you everything back. Spell slots, HP, it takes off points of exhaustion. Everything that is wrong is reset after 8 hours. So what does this mean? Well, it means that players can then plan around encounters to ensure that they have enough resources in order to beat the next fight. And what else does it mean? Well, it means after 8 hours, which is no time at all if you think about it, that is literally you just taking a normal amount of time to sleep, and you get everything back. All injuries, HP, it's all back to full. And what ends up happening is, you as the DM sit there and think, if they can rest after every single encounter, and why wouldn't you? That's the most optimum thing to do, then it just breaks all of my encounters. It breaks the CR system. So how do I plan around this? And this is the main thing. Never mind trying to plan a session or make fun encounters. Imagine trying to plan around a group of players that can rest at any time during the start and the end of a session to turn any encounter from the start to the end of that session, that could be a string of quite potent encounters, into just a breeze. And an easy combat isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if it doesn't have any impact on anything, then it's just wasting time. So the first thing you think is, okay, if they're going to rest after every single encounter, then I'll toss another encounter at them to stop them from resting. Except that won't happen. What will happen is, they'll have a combat encounter, they'll realise they're hurt, they'll take a long rest, you throw this long rest interrupting encounter at them, and then they go, oh, okay, we eventually beat it, but we're still hurt, so let's continue, or even restart the long rest. All that happened between starting the long rest and ending the long rest is there was another encounter in there, they beat, they're still alive, and all that changed was that it took longer. So what can we do? Well, there are a bunch of solutions out there, and they all can be applied to your game to change how the player experience should feel like for you. And let's talk about those right now. First of all, you can restrict where the players rest. If the player characters can rest literally anywhere, then that can be a problem for some people trying to plan encounters. So what you can do is tell them they can only rest in places of safety. They may choose to avoid encounters altogether in order to save spells and HP rather than just diving headfirst into the maw of a hook horror. I've just realised that hook horror is not something that I can really say in my accent. However, if you do this, don't be afraid to get specific and say, you can't rest in dungeons or this other place that you choose. In my own system that I'm making called Sanctum, you can only take a complete rest or a recovery if you're in a place of safety and security, like a settlement, for example. Because the players will argue that surely this room we've cleared is safe, right? I mean, we've barricaded the door, we've even put the remains of the hook horror in the corner like an office plant. This restriction alone is perfect for games where you want to show dungeons or a string of encounters as challenging, because you need to plan how much punishment you can take. But if you don't like the sound of that, one thing that I love to do is change the duration of rests. Because a long rest taking 8 hours is insane. It's just a night's sleep and you're on full health and you're a battery of spell slots again. But not only that, it's the fact that mid-dungeon, you can take a rest, wake up, choose through your bounty of spells to choose what will ace the next encounter, as opposed to, like, the fighter with his weapons, or everyone else with their equipment. You can just choose what spells you want mid-dungeon, as opposed to having to prepare for what's in the dungeon, maybe. Like, imagine this. In order to save the captive, you know you're going to have to venture down into the dungeon of the Silver Star. So, around town you start asking around for rumours, or asking around for people who've been down there before. They talk of goblins and spiders and jets of hot steam, so you go down there ready to defeat goblins, spiders, and jets of hot steam, only for the players to blast through the spiders, goblins, and jets of hot steam until they get to a lower level of the dungeon that this dungeoneer that they met in the town hadn't been there before. And they realise why there are jets of hot steam, because down there is a magma elemental causing the stone around him to become a boiling fume. That causes jets of hot steam. The wizard looks around, perplexed, and thinks, damn, I didn't prepare my breeze through the lava land and low difficulty spell. I guess we'll have to be creative now. So, instead, change the time for a short rest to 8 hours, and a long rest into a day. And if this sounds insane, then, well, the official book has a note for optional rules for resting, and it says a long rest is a week. So 1 day doesn't sound too bad, does it? In designing my own game, Sanctum, I did this with the rests, where a big rest is a day, a smaller rest is 8 hours, and I added a third kind of rest called a breather, which only takes 1 hour, and you only get a little bit of health back when you do so. And feel free to do something similar in your games. Add a third kind of rest called a breather, where you spend maybe one or a few hit dice to get some health back, but it's not quite a short rest. This change vastly recontextualizes everything, because now the wizard, the guy with all these spells, really needs to plan on how they use all these spells. They have the most spells, but now they have to think, oh, I'm not going to get these spell slots back until, well, Arcane Recovery, of course, but until we have a day outside this dungeon, maybe. And being a warlock, being able to get all your spells back on a short rest, which is 8 hours, as opposed to a day, you're loving life. And of course, I'm not saying use this tip and leave the encounters exactly the same. If you want the same number of fights to happen, or maybe even more of them, you'll probably need to focus on making the encounters more interesting and fun, rather than just harder. If every single fight is monstrous when they can't rest enough, then your players are going to die. But if you don't want to change anything, no extra rules, no homebrew, no extra stuff at all, well, this next tip is really simple. Just add a time limit. If you tell the players, the cult will sacrifice the noble sun at the stroke of midnight, which is 8 hours away, then hopefully they won't draw the conclusion that, oh, let's long rest our way through this entire dungeon. I recall in one of my past games, the players were delving into a dungeon to save their friendly NPC wizard when a flaming note appeared in their hand reading, "You have 1 hour until Malik opens the portal," which meant they needed to press on as opposed to, shall we take a rest? And the best bit is, no rules have changed. You haven't had to change anything or say at the table, hey guys, I'm changing the duration of rest or where you can rest. It's all the same rules, except now you've just said, actually in this encounter, I want to make it a bit more tense, so I'm going to add this time limit to make this encounter, this dungeon, this string of encounters, more deadly and interesting. Because the existing rules as they stand, the existing times for rests and that kind of thing, they're all in place to make you feel like fantasy superheroes. D&D execute a specific theme, and that is the ability to charge at a dragon and confront it with not a single nugget of poop in your pants. But if you'd like tension, stakes, and adventure, then discuss with your players how heavy an impact that resting has on the rest of the game. Resting all the time can make encounters very easy, so you adjust these encounters to accommodate for the fact that your players will rest all the time, only for them to not rest that one time and absolutely nail them. And you might think, I'll just spend more time, I'll just meticulously plan and produce the most difficult and challenging fight that there is, but all that's going to happen is the players are going to eventually beat the encounter and then take a long rest. And it all meant nothing. These tips will work great, trust me, but you have to set the tone with your players. What tone do they want from the game? Do they want fantasy superheroes? Or do they want stakes, tension, a more difficult experience, and some adventure? It's all for you to discuss, and once you do, you can then rest easy. That you'll have a better time. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, leave a comment, tell the people down below what tips you have to get around this problem. Because there are other things that you can do, like adding lasting stakes to combat beyond just HP, and if you'd like to know more about that, then click the video on screen. I love you all, and I'll see you next Saturday.